Good afternoon, everyone. The committee of the whole meeting is back on the record. Madam Clerk, can you please read the agenda for Block 3 into the record?
The agenda for Block 3 reads as follows. Bill number 36-0200, an act rezoning a portion of the remainder of Estate Beeston Hill, South portion, matricular number 6A, Company Quarters, St. Croix, from R-1, residential low density, to B-2, business secondary neighborhood. Invited testifiers are the Honorable Jean-Pierre Oriol, Commissioner of the Virgin Islands Department of Planning and Natural Resources, Ms. Leia LaPlace-Matthew, Territorial Planner of the Virgin Islands Department of Planning and Natural Resources, Ms. Asiah Barnes, Principal of Rittenhouse Consulting, LLC, Mr. Ada Misbe, Mr. Olasi Davis, resident, and Mr. David Daward, MD, resident. That concludes the reading of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, this rezoning seeks to change a portion of Estate Beeston Hill from R1 to B2 to facilitate a 24-unit cluster townhouse development on 3 to 4 acres. We have before us a record that reflects strong community support for well-planned housing, but equally strong objections to a B2 designation that could open the door to future non-residential uses inconsistent with the existing neighborhood and comprehensive land and water use plan. We also have different recommendations from the Planning Office and the Governor, one urging denial in favor of existing residential tools, the other supporting approval subject to strict housing-only conditions running with the land. As we examine this application, we must weigh the urgent need for additional housing against legitimate concerns about drainage, access, infrastructure, and neighborhood character. I also want to note for the record that the property owners have indicated a willingness to consider a compromise rezoning to R3, which may provide a path to additional density while remaining within a residential framework. Our goal today is to clarify the facts, probe the options, including an R3 alternative, and determine whether and how this project can proceed in a way that is both lawful and respectful of the Beeston Hill community. I'm going to start by having the testifiers give their names, put their names on the record, beginning from my right, and we'll move.
Good afternoon. My name is Ata Misbe. I'm the owner and the developer of 6A Beeston Hill.
Good afternoon, Senator Potter, and good afternoon to the listening and viewing audience. Good afternoon, members of the 36th Legislature. I am Asiah Barnes, Principal, Rittenhouse Consulting, and consultant to the property owner.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon again. Leia LaPlace-Matthew, Territorial Planner with DPNR.
Good afternoon. Gail Pagan, Planning Technician at DPNR.
Honorable
Speak into the mic.
President Milton Potter, honorable senators of the 36th Legislature. My name is Dr. David Augustin Doward, and I am a proponent. I oppose bill number 360200.
Thank you. We're going to start with the testimony of Territorial Planner, Ms. Leia LaPlace-Matthew. You may proceed, Ms. Matthew, with your testimony.
Thank you. This testimony is the petition to amend official zoning map number SCZ-7, application number CCZP 0069-25. I ask Planning Technician Gail Pagan to read that testimony into the record.
Good afternoon once again, Senate President Milton E. Potter, members of the 36th Legislature, legislative staff, and members of the public. My name is Gail Pagan, and I am Planning Technician with the Division of Comprehensive and Coastal Zone Planning within the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. We are here to present the department's recommendation on zoning map amendment application number CCZP 0069-25. This application, submitted by Ata Misbah, seeks to amend the zoning designation of portion of the remainder of Estate Beeston Hill South portion, matricular number 6A, Company Quarter, St. Croix, from R1 residential low density to B2 business secondary neighborhood. The purpose of the request is to develop townhouses for both rental and sale. A 24-unit clustered residential development on 3 to 4 acres. 70% of units are proposed for rental, split evenly between short and long term, and 30% for purchase. Access is proposed via the private Beeston Hill Road, with construction estimated to last 24 months. DPNR has conducted a thorough review of the application, including an analysis of adjacent land use, zoning trends, infrastructure availability, and public input. The surrounding area includes R1 and R3 residential medium zoning with nearby rezonings to R3, B2, and B3 granted for higher residential and business activities. The department notes the following key findings. Infrastructure needs are proposed to be met by public water and sewer lines. At the DPNR CCZP public hearing held on September 15, 2025, there were over 50 attendees and 39 formal letters of objection submitted. The main reasons for objections were community integrity and zoning. Residents value the quiet residential character of Beeston Hill and surrounding neighborhoods. Opposition is rooted in responsible development, not resistance to progress. B2 zoning permits non-residential uses, posing long-term risk to neighborhood integrity. The proposed zoning contradicts the comprehensive land and water use plan and misrepresents the project's stated residential intent. Planning and feasibility. No traffic, environmental, stormwater, or infrastructure studies have been conducted. Deferring assessments to permitting stages is viewed as inadequate and irresponsible. Lack of a full site plan and unclear development footprint raise concerns about transparency and feasibility. The rental-heavy model may disqualify units from traditional mortgages, limiting affordability. Environmental and infrastructure risks. The site is a natural drainage basin with a history of flooding. No updating mitigation plans were provided. Proposed access is via a narrow, privately owned road with an unsafe blind spot. Increased strain on traffic and infrastructure strain are anticipated, with no supporting studies submitted. Alternate approaches. The project could proceed under existing R1 zoning using subdivision, group dwelling permit, or planned area development, PAD mechanisms. PAD precedent exists. Act 8994, Estate St. Joseph and Rosendahl, offering a transparent path for increased density without commercial rezoning. Housing support with conditions. Residents support well-planned housing to address the island's affordability crisis. However, the proposed rental mix and lack of guarantees for permanent housing undermine stated goals. No binding assurances have been offered to prevent future commercial or mixed-use development. The community did not oppose housing development, but strongly opposed the B2 rezoning due to its inconsistency with the area's character, lack of due diligence, and potential for future commercial encroachment. Residents urged the use of existing residential zoning tools to achieve development goals while preserving community integrity. Consistent with the provisions of 29 VIC Section 238, The report from the Planning Office regarding this proposal has been shared with the Legislature, and it recommends to the Legislature that the zoning change be denied in favor of other tools available by law, such as a subdivision, a group dwelling permit, or a planned area development. In his transmittal of the application, Governor Bryan recommends that the Legislature approve the zoning change to B2, subject to the conditions that only construction of a 24-unit clustered residential development on 3 to 4 acres, inclusive of a playground, green space, and an outdoor meeting space be permitted, and that any future development requires the consent of the Legislature, and that the prohibition on development run with the property, regardless of ownership. In his transmittal, the governor cites the need to support residential development given the limitations of our current housing stock. In the department's review of the governor's request, we concur that the Legislature could issue the rezoning subject to conditions, which in effect would be akin to a variance being granted, something the department has sought legislative approval of countless times. The limitation to just a housing development is consistent with the uses permitted under a group dwelling permit or planned area development, and the more restrictive the condition, the more aligned with the existing tools the conditional approval will be. As the department has not received any evaluation of business activity from the applicant, no business-related activities should be approved. The department has one clarifying comment on the proposed conditions, which is that the consent of the Legislature be specifically defined. Does consent mean a vote by the Committee of the Whole or a vote in the committee of the appropriate jurisdiction? If so, which one? It would be better for all parties if this was explicitly defined. The territory needs more housing options, and we commend the applicant for putting forward a proposal that seeks to address some of that need. Several options are before the Legislature, which would be legally binding, but in the end could lead to additional housing units. Should the Legislature elect to proceed with this zoning map amendment, it should be conditioned such that it is in line with the existing tools currently available.
This concludes our testimony, and we respectfully request that the PowerPoint presentation for CCZP 0069-25 be displayed. So the first is the aerial photo of the site's location. You'll see it's at Beeston Hill, and across the Queen Mary Highway is Estate Herman Hill. Next slide. Another map geo representation. Next slide. So this is the official zoning map showing the zoning of the property and its surrounding areas. But as noted in our recommendation report, there are some rezonings within the area. There's a gym that's in front of the property that touches Queen Mary Highway, which was rezoned. There is also a church that was rezoned. There's a non-conforming medical complex, and then the remaining surrounding area is residential. Next slide. This is the conceptual layout for the 24 dwelling units that was submitted for the file. That concludes the presentation. We are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. LaPlace-Matthew. Senator Bonds, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Senator. Good day, Honorable Milton E. Potter, President of the 36th Legislature of the U.S. Virgin Islands and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole, members of the 36th Legislature, and the listening and viewing audience. I am Alicia V. Barnes, Principal of Rittenhouse Consulting. I appear before you today on behalf of applicant and property owner Atta Misbe to provide testimony on Bill number 36-0200. an act amending official zoning map number SCZ-7 for the island of St. Croix, Virgin Islands, rezoning a portion of the remainder of Estate Beeston Hill, south portion, matricular number 6A, Company Quarter, St. Croix, from R1 residential low density to B2 business secondary neighborhood. I would like to provide additional comments regarding the pending rezoning request. While my formal testimony was submitted for the previously scheduled hearing, I would like to clarify several points considering the misinformation surrounding this matter. First, the property owner has no plans to develop a commercial shopping center, as evidenced by its removal from the rezoning request. Second, the owner is not opposed to an R3 rezoning. We believe this is a reasonable compromise that allows the project to proceed without further delay while addressing, hopefully, the concerns of surrounding residents. However, I must also address the broader issues at play here. This opposition is less about environmental concerns and more about economic elitism. The legislature holds the power to rezone because you represent the people of this territory, not a select few. St. Croix is currently facing a significant housing shortage. This rezoning would address that need directly, ensuring that progress is not stymied by a small group seeking to protect their personal interests at the expense of future generations. Mr. Misbe has lived and worked on St. Croix most of his life. He is a product of our public education system, and like many of us, he has witnessed firsthand the challenges many residents experience when seeking adequate and affordable housing. The proposed development would increase the available housing inventory on St. Croix and thus aid in mitigating the island's housing crisis. The proposed development includes the construction of 24 units of residential moderate income rentals in Estate Beeston Hill. This will be a thoughtful planned development with natural buffers and green space. The plan includes 6 two-story buildings with 4 units each, ranging from 750 square foot efficiencies to 1,500 square foot 2-bedroom apartments. There will be 2 parking spaces per unit, a playground, and as previously mentioned, green space. It is important to note that land use allowance is the first step in the development permitting process. Inherent in applicable permitting processes are safeguards to ensure protection of our natural environment as well as public health and safety. Many, if not all of the concerns raised by the applicant's public comment period will be addressed later in the proposed development's permitting process. Notwithstanding, I would like to take this opportunity to address the concerns raised regarding the proposed development and to clarify any resulting misunderstandings. Regarding the concern that the housing development entrance off the Beeston Hill private road would lead to traffic congestion, please be advised that formal traffic studies are a requirement during the land development and permitting phase. This phase is the appropriate time for the relevant authorities to address potential traffic issues and provide recommendations accordingly. In response to the inquiry regarding the necessity of a B2 designation over R1, R2, or R3, as stated, the property owner is not opposed to an R3 rezoning. Furthermore, There have been concerns that the rezoning will result in environmental, safety, and aesthetic issues. During the land development and permitting phase, the Department of Planning and Natural Resources would require flora and fauna studies, cultural resource surveys, and safety studies. These are standard regulatory requirements imposed on every major land development to ensure no detrimental harm to the environment occurs. To address the comment that the cost estimates presented at the hearing were not realistic, the applicant possesses significant control over the major costs of development, as the applicant owns the land, a concrete company, and heavy equipment. They are uniquely positioned to manage these expenses effectively. Regarding the inquiry into the plan for the unused acreage remaining after development, there are currently no plans for that land beyond establishing an appropriate buffer for an adjacent property. In response to questions concerning the assessment of utility infrastructure, including sewage, electrical, and water, as well as stormwater management and environmental impact, please note, these detailed studies are required during the land development permitting phase rather than the current allowable land usage phase. All necessary assessments will be conducted at the appropriate stages of the permitting processes. I hope this information clarifies our position and addresses the points raised. I would like to close by stating that I am aware of the source of this opposition, and it is truly not represented by the individual testifying here today against this rezoning request. Instead, those responsible often hide behind cryptic emails, which I have received, and letters to the editor, attempting to pit us against one another. Mr. Misbeh and I will not succumb to these divisive tactics. For too long, environmental regulations and zoning laws have been used as tools to marginalize and disenfranchise Black and brown people under the guise of environmental protection. If an elite group of wealthy residents can prevent a property owner from developing his land today, nothing stops them from targeting any of us tomorrow. They attempted this with Just Right Trucking, and they are attempting it now with Mr. Misbeh. And Just Right Trucking is up and running. All of the hysteria, again, much ado about nothing. Senators, the power is vested in you to protect all the people of this territory, not just a select elite few. On behalf of the property owner, Mr. Atta Misbeh, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill number 36-0200. Mr. Misbeh and I remain available to answer any questions or to provide further clarification as you consider this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Senator Alicia Barnes. Dr. David Doward, you may move forward with your testimony.
Good day, Honorable President Milton Potter, honorable senators of the 36th Legislature, all legislative staff present, and member of the public, both viewing and listening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Dr. David Augustine Doward. I am a physician, a Virgin Islander by birth, and the owner of the property directly adjacent to Parcel 6A, Beeston Hill. I appear before you today in respectful but firm opposition to Bill number 36-0200. Let me begin clearly. I support housing. I support responsible development. What I do not support is the unnecessary commercial rezoning of residential land when existing law already provides a clear path forward. Like many Virgin Islanders, I left home to pursue education and professional training, always with the hope of returning to invest in St. Croix and raise my family here. I purchased my property in Beeston Hill, a historic home, according to the rules in place at the time with the expectation that the surrounding land would remain governed by the established residential zoning framework. Parcel 6A Beeston Hill sits directly adjacent to my home. So yes, this matter is personal to me. But I want to be equally clear, this concern extends well beyond my household. It reflects broader questions about planning, consistency, community stability, and long-term confidence in our zoning framework. We all recognize that St. Croix needs additional housing. That point is not in dispute. However, the professional record before this body is clear. The Department of Planning and Natural Resources has twice recommended denial of the requested commercial rezoning in both 2021 and 2025. Importantly, DPNR identified multiple lawful pathways that would allow the proposed residential development without converting this land to B2. These include subdivision, group dwelling, and planned area development under 29 Virgin Islands Code Section 232. In short, housing can move forward under the current zoning. There is no demonstrated legal or practical necessity to rezone nearly 16 acres to a broad commercial classification in order to achieve a 24-unit residential project. I present Exhibit 1, which is the closing section of DPNR's May 6, 2021 report regarding the earlier request to rezone 6A Beeston Hill from R1 to B3. The department, which I will read, the department's opinion is that the rezoning of this much acreage to B3 zoning is not appropriate, and the development proposal should be revisited, considering one of the three mentioned options: subdivision, group dwelling, or planned area development. It is recognized that the Virgin Islands has a housing shortage, and the development options available would allow for the property to be developed in consideration of the already established character and zoning of the area, as well as allow for neighbor concerns to be incorporated into a final development plan. The Department of Planning and Natural Resources recommends denial of the petition to rezone portion of the remainder of Estate Beeston Hill South portion, matricular number 6A, Company Quarter, St. Croix, signed by Keith Richards on 5/6/2021. I also present Exhibit 2, which is an excerpt from page 7 of DPNR's October 21st, 2025 report. As part of its analysis, DPNR took into account the applicant's statement regarding an excess of commercial property in St. Croix that is grossly underutilized. And I will read the highlighted part. The applicant stated during the public hearing that a market study was done, and it was determined that on St. Croix, there is excessive commercial property that is grossly underutilized. There is no demand for commercial property. There is no intention to develop this property for commercial uses. It was also stated that if the zoning were compatible and rezoning not required, then the zoning map amendment phase would not be needed. Permitting would be the first phase of the development's process. Exhibit 3 presents DPNR's October 21st, 2025 recommendation to deny rezoning of 6A Beeston Hill, since the proposed development can be accomplished using the planning and development tools already available. I will read the highlighted area. The Department of Planning and Natural Resources recommends denial of the zoning map amendment request and acknowledges the proposed and development can be accomplished using the planning development tools currently available: subdivision, group dwelling permit, and planned area development, signed by Josette Walker on 10/21/2025. Even more concerning is the reported unit allocation associated with the project. Planning materials indicate that approximately 70% of the units are intended as rentals, and roughly half of those rentals may be short-term. That results in only a limited number of units available for home ownership while introducing a higher turnover visitor component into what is currently a low-density residential area. This raises a reasonable policy question for this body. If the primary objective is to expand stable housing opportunities for residents and returning Virgin Islanders, does this structure meaningfully advance that goal? The developer's concept indicates that approximately 3 to 4 acres would be used for the residential component, yet the bill rezones the entire 15.942 acre parcel to B2. This leaves the majority of the property, roughly 11 to 12 acres, commercially rezoned but programmatically undefined. Under Virgin Islands law, B2 permits approximately 197 potential uses. Once that designation is granted, those uses become legally permissible. This creates long-term uncertainty regarding future commercial conversion, traffic and infrastructure intensity, loss of residential land inventory, upward pressure on land pricing. Future homeowners in the development would not be shielded from broader commercial uses associated under the new zoning. DP&R highlighted this concern in its 2025 report, as shown in Exhibit 4, which is an excerpt from the 2025 report. The petition B2 zone is not compatible with the proposed development, nor the comp plan, contradicts theme goal of reducing no-spot zoning, and development does not address housing with 8 to 9 short-term rental units. The intent of the B2 zone was primarily business use, with residential use being 3 out of 197 uses. The B2 zoning increases the potential for incompatible non-residential development. The estate Orange Grove Company Quarter Hillside, if utilized as a case study, shows that commercial development will occur with a zone that is primarily for business use, even though the intent of the Orange Grove rezonings were to allow for a mixed-use neighborhood. Public statements have suggested that this rezoning is narrowly limited to a 24-unit residential project with continuing legislative oversight. However, as written, Bill number 36-0200 contains none of those safeguards. The legislation simply amends the zoning map to reclassify parcel from R1 to B2. There is no binding unit cap, no housing-only restriction, no perpetual limitation running with the land, no conditional overlay mechanism. As legislatures, you understand clearly, public statements do not amend statutory law. If housing-only limitations are truly intended, they must appear in the legislation itself. I present Exhibit 5, which are publicly provided statements on the Government House's Facebook page. I will read the highlighted section. The bill limits development to the proposed construction of a 24-unit clustered residential development on 3 to 4 acres. This concept includes a playground, green space, and an outdoor meeting space. No other development or construction may be initiated or approved on the property without express consent from the legislature. The prohibition on development without legislative consent would run with the land in perpetuity, regardless of ownership. Exhibit 6 is the bill before you today, which does not contain any of the promised safeguards and provides an uncontrolled blanket rezoning of the 15.9 acre parcel. I will read that. An act amending official zoning map number SCZ-7 for the island of St. Croix, Virgin Islands, rezoning a portion of the remainder of Estate Beeston Hill, South portion, matricular number 6A, Company Quarter, St. Croix, from R1 residential low density to B2 business secondary neighborhood, proposed by Senator Milton E. Potter by request of the governor. Be it enacted by the legislature of the Virgin Islands, Section 1, pursuant to Title 29, Virgin Islands Code, Chapter 3, Section 238, official zoning map number SCZ-7 for the island of St. Croix, amended by changing the zoning designation for portion of the remainder of Estate Beeston Hill South portion, matricular number 6A, Company Quarter, consisting of 15.942 U.S. acres, as collectively described on survey drawing number A9-3-C008 from R1 residential low density to B2 secondary neighborhood. This bill rezones a portion of the remainder of Estate Beeston Hill South portion, matricular number 6A, Company Quarter, St. Croix R1 residential low density to B2 business secondary neighborhood. The comprehensive land and water use plan was adopted after years of public engagement and was intended to bring predictability and discipline to land use decisions across the territory. One of its central themes was moving away from ad hoc spot zoning and towards structured, plan-based development. Approving a broad commercial rezoning here, despite DP&R's professional recommendations and available residential development pathways, risks undermining confidence in that carefully developed framework. DP&R's 2025 recommendation report highlights this concern. I present Exhibit 7, an excerpt from that report. The 2024 adopted Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan noted the rising cost of housing, the USVI experiencing a housing crisis, need for more affordable housing options and housing types, and housing affordability as a significant challenge. The main drivers of the lack of affordable housing are the comparably low incomes of USVI residents, high costs of construction, limited availability of developable land, demand pressures from non-residents, and high costs of financing challenges. The provision of housing must be balanced with key themes and goals that were common across all three islands and that are important topics in the comp plan, namely one theme goal being the reducing of opportunity for spot zoning, no more spot zoning, the rezoning of a parcel of land to benefit an owner for use incompatible with surrounding uses and not for the purpose of furthering a comprehensive plan, analyzing the need for housing, the intent for a solely residential development, and the topic of reducing spot zoning. The current zoning was assessed to determine the ability to develop the proposal while being compatible with the comp plan. I would like to briefly speak as someone who hopes to continue investing in St. Croix. Many Virgin Islanders living abroad and many professionals like myself want to come home, retire here, and reinvest in our communities. But long-term investment decisions depend heavily on the stability and predictability of land use policy. When long-standing residential land can be broadly converted to commercial use without demonstrated necessity, it creates uncertainty that extends well beyond a single parcel. Before I close, I would like to briefly place several additional questions on the record in light of developments that have occurred during the postponement of this hearing, which supplement the written testimony I previously submitted. First, it has been suggested that rezoning this property from R1 residential to B2 commercial is necessary because it allows for a greater degree of financing leverage to move the project forward. However, after speaking with multiple financial institutions that regularly finance development projects across the Virgin Islands, it is clear that this does not reflect how development financing actually works. Banks do not finance zoning classifications, they finance the project being proposed. If the developer intends to construct a 24-unit project, the financing is evaluated based on that residential project itself, regardless of whether the property is zoned R1, R2, R3, or B2. In other words, the financing available for a residential project is determined by the residential development being proposed, not by commercial zoning. The only circumstance in which B2 zoning would increase financing capacity is if the property were developed to its full commercial potential, which includes broader range of business uses permitted under B2. That naturally raises concern for surrounding residents. Because if the intention is truly to build only residential housing, then commercial zoning should not be necessary to finance that project. Following this discussion about financing, it's also important to note that Territorial Planner Leia LaPlace-Matthew has clearly stated that the manner in which a project is financed is not a relevant consideration in rezoning decisions. As she explained, rezoning is intended to determine the appropriate long-term land use for a property based on planning considerations, not to increase a property's appraised value or to improve the financing position of a particular project. Changing a zoning designation primarily to increase a property's appraised value for loan purposes would present a misuse of the territory's land use framework and is inconsistent with the purpose of zoning laws. Zoning should reflect the appropriate use of land, not the financing needs of a project. Respectfully, if financing considerations are not a legitimate basis for rezoning under the territory's own planning guidance, then it raises a question of why financing has become the central justification for this zoning change. Another important question concerns fairness and precedent. If the legislature is willing to rezone the property from residential to commercial zoning in order to increase its financing potential and market value, why would the opportunity not be available to every Virgin Island?
1 second, Doc. I know there's a level of concern, because typically I've been very liberal with you in allowing you to ad-lib beyond your submitted testimony. So I'm sure that is what my colleague is going to refer to, but I don't want to speak for you.
Chair, I did not mean to interrupt, but for the sake of the procedures, I did not have the testimony. We received something just now, and it's totally different from what you're relaying on the record. So I just wanted to get a clarification from the chair pertinent to that. Am I holding the proper testimony is my question at this time.
I don't know what you have in your hand, but we do have a testimony that Dr. Doward submitted, but at one point he deviates from the submitted testimony and does,
yeah.
I see you referring to another document. So perhaps you can provide us with a copy of that additional supplemental document that you're reading from.
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide that.
But I'd like you to focus on refocus on your submitted testimony.
I'm happy to wrap up, and I'm happy to submit it. I was notified very late about my invitation for this. I did try to submit testimony, and I was told that it was a little late to submit it, but I was also informed that I didn't realize I was going to be restricted in additional comments based on the fact that this initial testimony was postponed.
Yeah, I mean, we did receive a testimony from you that we were following all along, but what sort of shifted was when you apparently started reading from an additional document. In a question and answer period, hopefully you would have had opportunities to elaborate further, but you know, I just wanted to give you as much leeway as I could, which I did, but I would like you to refocus on the testimony that you actually submitted. And you can provide us with a copy of the document that you're reading from.
I would be happy to get back. So, honorable senators, this is not a choice between housing and no housing. Housing can proceed under existing residential tools already provided in Virgin Islands law. The real question before this body is whether it's necessary or prudent to permanently commercialize nearly 16 acres of residential land in order to achieve that goal. For the reasons outlined today, I respectfully urge you to vote no on bill number 36-0200 and to encourage residential development through the lawful pathways already exist. Thank you for your time, your service, and for your thoughtful consideration. Respectfully.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doward. And I want to give, before I recognize Senator Blyden for his point of information, I also want to give Alicia Barnes an opportunity to put your credentials on the record. You didn't do that before.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. Let's start with, as many of you know, I served as a member of the 33rd Legislature, and very pleased that I revived the discussion on the need to adopt a comprehensive land and water use plan. That's an irrefutable fact. That discussion was dead until I joined this August body. And I am so delighted that the 34th legislature moved forward with adopting the comprehensive land and water use plan, a policy framework to guide development in this territory. I served as Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources under Bob Mathis, and I was tasked with developing the revisions to the zoning code, which should have been a precursor to the comprehensive land and water use plan. I work with Rutgers University Urban Planning Institute and sent those revisions down to the legislature when I served as commissioner of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. I am the premier subject matter expert on zoning and planning historically in this territory, and I would say so without hesitation. I have an undergraduate degree in environmental science from Hampton University, a master's degree in public administration from the University of the Virgin Islands. I have served as energy director. I have served as environmental manager for the Water and Power Authority. Kyle Fleming was my intern. I have a legacy in this territory of technical expertise. And so when I come before this body with measures, they're carefully thought out. This is not spot zoning. And I would like to say that I thank you, Senator Potter, for giving me the opportunity to place these facts on the record, because oftentimes persons may try to diminish persons' contributions to this territory. And I'm at the point right now where I'm not allowing my contributions to be diminished any longer. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Senator Marvin Blyden, you're recognized for your point of information.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. But before I go to the point of information, I just want to correct the record. Senator Barnes was the 35th legislature that part of the comprehensive land and water use plan.
Thank you.
Okay, very well.
I corrected.
Very well. Mr. LaPlace-Matthew, let me ask you in respect to this bill. To the chair, the R3 zoning, is it in conformity with the comprehensive land and water use plan? That's all I need to know.
No, Senator.
It's not?
No, Senator. The comprehensive land and water use plan, which was pushed by the people of the VI, one of the major themes is no more spot zoning, and spot zoning benefits a particular property owner rather than the public in general. The current code has mechanisms that can already be used to accomplish the project. Thus, spot zoning would not be necessary.
Very well. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Blyden. We're going to move to a 4-minute round. I'm going to start on St. Thomas. Senator Alma Francis Heiliger, you may proceed with your 4 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I initially had a whole list of questions to start off with, but I'm just gonna wing it because I was here in 2021 when we had this discussion. We talked about it last year. Now we're having the discussion again. Couple of things I want to understand. Now I know when this suggestion from the governor was sent down, I think I heard him on a press conference say that he was a little bit, it was limited to just housing. I don't know, when was the decision within this body to strip away the recommendation, or since it was sent by the governor, because if you read it, it says Senator Milton Potter by request of the governor. And we seem to be having a situation where the governor is saying what he sent down had it limited to housing, but what we have before us, all of that is taken out. Now, I know I didn't do it, so I'm trying to figure out when it got to this body, when did that part happen? Because I'm all for limiting it to housing. I don't have a problem with that, if that's what it's gonna be. But I have a major problem when you're attempting to rezone 15 acres to commercial zone with no limitations. We have had rezonings in here when we have moved things to different zones, and we have limited, because that particular zone has so many things allowed, we have gone in and limited and stripped away the ability to build certain types of businesses or certain types of things on that property, even though it was rezoned to that, and then the law allows it, but we put in the document, you can't do it. So I am seriously trying to figure out, when did we as a body change this? I don't know. Was it a mix-up in legal counsel? Did we get the wrong document? Because if you have a governor to the point that he's having meetings and press conferences to say this is not what I sent, I'm very much confused at what's happening here today. That's the first thing. The second concern I had, I know the supporter that came to represent said that they don't have a problem with it getting rezoned to R3, and that should resolve the issue. I don't think so.
1 minute.
Because R3 has a whole lot of things you could actually put on this property. I mean, inclusive auditoriums, boarding houses, homes, churches, even medical clinics. And if I recall correctly, in 2021, that was one of the biggest issues. Now, I think we're talking about the same property. Wasn't that one of the issues we had back in 21 about building medical facilities on this property? And then, if I recall correctly, these things were apparently taken out. But it's here under R3. So I'm gonna ask Ms. LaPlace-Matthew, am I accurate, or am I getting mixed up with these properties? Because this thing has come before us several times.
It is the same property, yes, Senator.
Yes, and it was originally wanted to do all these medical facilities and all these other things. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, and it's also under R3 that they would be allowed to do those things if we were just to let them do R3. So I can't agree to that either. I am of the stance that I don't have a problem if we set up a situation for housing. If you want to carve out 3 to 4 acres for housing and a playground, I don't have a problem with that. But to completely rezone an entire 15 acres, leave it open-ended, I distinctly remember people have come before this body, tell us they're going to rezone to do a project, never do the project, and take that R1 property that's now a B3 or B2 that is so much more valuable, cut up the property and sold it. And y'all can't tell me this hasn't happened. So if we know these are some of the things that happen right here, why would we not put in guardrails and safeguards to make sure that this project stays residential? Why wouldn't we do it? Why am I hearing the governor who sent it down saying this is not what I sent? I have a problem with things like this, because now the public is saying, oh, the legislature did it, when Senator Alma Francis Heiliger don't know nothing about it. Right is right and wrong is wrong. At the end of the day, I cannot support this in its current form. I am not going to block a housing project if it's for housing, but I am not going to rezone a property that leaves it open-ended. And while people come before us and say A, and then tomorrow it's actually B. We have the right to protect the people that reside in these areas. We have the right to make sure that we follow laws to make sure that things are limited. And when you have DPNR coming and saying, listen, we don't agree with this, those are the experts that we pay. Those are the experts that this government hires. Those are the people that we send out to have the town halls, get the research, follow the law,
Senator,
come back and tell us what's going on.
Senator, I hate to...
my time is up?
Yes, about 2 minutes ago.
I didn't hear it, but thank you so much. But until this has a limitation for housing, I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Alma Francis Heiliger. Senator Dwayne DeGraff, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, testifiers. All of you listening and present. Good move, Senator. You know, in my 10 years in the Senate, one thing I've learned, if it's not written, you don't vote for it. We could talk all the talk we want. You know, I heard 3 to 4 acres is all would be needed for the building of the apartments that the gentleman is trying to get done. But in the bill says, number 6A company quarter consisting of 15.942 acres. 3 to 4 to build, and we're going to approve for 15.4. That's a red flag to me. You know, I was told that it was mentioned in listening to testimony that the legislature would be, after the buildings are built, then the legislature has to say on the rest of the property. It's not written. There's one section, and that section doesn't mention anything. So those are some of the red flags that I have. Do I think if someone owns a piece of property that they should be able to build what they want, do what they want out of it? I do. But again, we have the parameters of the zoning that we should abide by. And that's why we come before the legislature. Now the legislature can say, hey, if DPNR supports it, we could still shut it down. If DPNR is against it, we could still pass it. That's the power of the legislature. But in looking at the totality of the circumstances and what's being said, for me, is there's only one section, and it mentions about 15.9, roughly 16 acres of land that we are trying to rezone, and the facility can be accomplished in 3 to 4, a quarter of that. So I think that needs to be addressed. Now, Ms. LaPlace-Matthew, how many times have you, now I also saw there's an amendment floating around in regards to building these particular facilities in as the doctor mentioned regarding a piece of, no, correction, a piece of property, no, the amendment, boy, I'm trying to pull it up. The amendment is for planned area development. Does planned area development, that in itself sounds very, very broad to me as an amendment. Planned area development is a zoning that might be something that you might agree to in DPNR?
Yes, Senator. A planned area development is actually a permit that gets legislative approval. So the applicant has to submit studies and construction drawings for review by the department and the public, and then the finalized plans go before the legislature for you to approve. And one such case was the one on St. Thomas for St. Joseph and Rosendale. And the plan area development, that permit, the applicant has to adhere to it. Any changes require coming back to the legislature. And there is an expiration clause that they have to do the construction within 2 years or the PAD expires.
Okay, and just to wrap up, I think I heard my time, Chair, Mr. Chair, just to wrap up, So then that planned area development would be for the 3 to 4 acres that the gentleman needs to develop the housing part of it, or based on what the bill says, the 15.9 acres is what the planned area development would be for. Can it be converted to just say the 3 or 4 acres that he needs to develop that housing?
The PAD, it can be the 15 acres, but they have to adhere to the construction drawings. So if the buildings are shown on only 3 to 4 acres, then the rest acreage cannot be developed.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator DeGraff. I wanted to ask you, Ms. LaPlace, about the R3 zoning designation. And I think when my colleague on the left asked about whether or not this would conform with the comprehensive land and water use plan, you said no, because comprehensive land and water use plan really discourages spot zoning, which is what this body basically has been doing all day today, right?
Yes, Senator.
For the zonings that we did earlier this morning, as well as this afternoon. So there's nothing really distinguishing what we're doing with this particular project versus what we did earlier this morning.
Well, to give clarification, Senator, the code has been in existence from 1972. So over the years, we've seen certain estates have changes that we recognize, okay, the original zone was in error, or the original zone is not keeping up with the demands. We have to look at each application individually. Unfortunately for Beeston Hill, there has not been enough change to justify that change to R3.
Okay, and I'm gonna get you to respond in a second. I wanted to get you to explain to me the distinguishing features between an R3, which is what is being proposed as a compromise zoning, versus the original B2, which is a much more commercial, my understanding, much more commercial, an open-ended designation. Can you just broadly explain the differences between the two zonings?
So the R3 and the B2 are both mixed-use zones. So you really have to look at the table of permitted uses and the development provisions. The density is slightly different. The setbacks, well, both zones don't have setbacks, but you have to look at height, density, lot coverage, usable open space. So you really have to go into the code and look at that table of permitted uses and the development provisions.
Okay, so just right off the bat, B2 represents a commercial business, wide open designation where you can just put up your supermarkets, you can just have your way. But R3 isn't that a residential designation?
It is a residential designation. It's medium density.
Medium density.
So it's higher than the R1 and the R2. It also allows more commercial uses than you would see in the R1, R2 zones. And it has certain limitations like the lot occupancy and the requirement for usable open space. The B2, its main intent is commercial use, but it allows some residential.
Thank you for that. Senator Barnes?
Senator, thank you so much. You know, Senator, we're having an exercise in semantics, and it's unfortunate because if we had adopted the revisions to the zoning code prior to the comprehensive land and water use plan, much of these issues would have been resolved. But to answer your question, Senator, the difference would be the design and development criteria. And with the R3, you would have more restrictive design and development criteria. And so that is why we are proposing R3 as a compromise. And so when you go into the zoning code, It would give you certain parameters and restrictions, density requirements, setback requirements. So this would provide a more restrictive allowance. In addition to that, we're saying that we're not doing spot zoning, but that's what a planned area development is. So we really need to be transparent with the public and talk about the time frame associated with some of these processes. Ms. LaPlace has testified on the record that DPNR is short-staffed. We have a housing crisis now. We have issues relative to workforce development and where are we going to house these workers that will be coming in here for Rebuild USVI now. We can't even get a stormwater permit out of DPNR. We're going to get a planned area development out of DPNR now. So let's just be also for real and deal with the issues at hand in real time, not theoretically, but practically.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Senator Gittens, you're recognized for your point of information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to the first point of information and your follow-up just now, the R3, based on what I'm seeing, primarily allows, primarily allows for single-family homes, duplexes, townhomes, apartment buildings, multifamily, etc. There's also acceptance for, I guess, the hospitality uses, which is becoming the topic of discussion now. However, Ms. LaPlace-Matthew, we have moved legislation previously where we put safeguards in there that could read somewhere like on the condition that in addition to the permitted lot occupancy limitation, no less than a percentage of the rezoned lot must remain green space, and no gas stations whatsoever, no bars, no taverns, no nightclubs, or outdoor music entertainment are permitted. In this case, if it's a concern that you believe, like a guest house or something, a hotel, or some tourist accommodation is going to be built for the safeguards, we can put that in there. Would that be acceptable to DPNR?
As mentioned in our testimony, safeguards would be acceptable. We would just need them to be explicit. As previously mentioned, the governor had some conditions. One of the conditions was about having to come back to the legislature, and we just needed clarification on what committee, which committee it would be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Gittens. Senator Angel Bolquez Jr., you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, we're here in a little quandary in relation to finding that happy medium where everyone can coexist. We have the pushback and we have the pull. Mr. Mesby, I want to first say you're very persistent, and persistence and resilience are very important, and it shows the character of a person. And you are also very flexible in the sense of trying to accommodate and find that happy medium. And as we go through this process, hopefully we will. And for the residents as well, you know, protecting your safe space is understood and respected. But we also need to work together if we can. We've seen that many accommodations have been made, and we're now to the juncture where we're likely going to hopefully get a R3 and provide much needed housing for the people of St. Croix. From what I understood, there is a utilization of maybe 4 acres on a 16-acre property leaving a majority of the land as preserved open green space. Is that the final plan?
Well, our intention is to redevelop more units.
Hopefully, eventually. But you're beginning with the 24.
24, correct.
Okay, okay. Now, I want to switch over to DPNR, Ms. LaPlace. Would you say that a lot of the zonings across the Virgin Islands are misclassified?
At this time, many of them are they're just not keeping up with the trends.
Okay, very well. And we have adopted a comprehensive land and water use plan. However, because of using this term, misclassifications of zonings which are not keeping up with the demands of growth, our economy changes. Back in the days, we had a predominant agriculture staple throughout the Caribbean. And we have continued to grow economically, and we have changed different zonings to accommodate certain things, whether it's for residents, whether it's for the economy, whether it's for schools, hospitals, etc., and the list goes on. Even though we have adopted this comprehensive land and water use plan, I am of the opinion that everyone will still have to come to the legislature to appropriately rezone these areas to accommodate what the land and water use plan has within its information and data. So we will likely be rezoning to comply with that plan for years to come. Do you believe that's correct, Ms. LaPlace?
Yes, Senator.
Very well, thank you. So this is not far-fetched today. This is not illegal. This is not out of compliance. There is a request. Unfortunately, the request cannot be made as initially provided to the body. We've had a number of stops, and here we are at this junction that we're voting today. But the business owner has now stated that they're willing to accommodate a R3, as long as the parameters, as mentioned by the Vice President earlier, the protections to accommodate the residents in a sense of no nightclubs, no this, no that, should be made at the appropriate time. I know I have not asked a question outside of that, but I believe that we can find a happy medium. And we just have to work together in order to make this happen. Housing is a big, big issue across the Virgin Islands.
Time.
More so on the island. Mr. Chair, if I may,
yes, you may
conclude. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. More so on the island of St. John, where it's super, super expensive to buy a piece of property, if not even a home. So I commend you, Mr. Mesbe, for wanting to support housing on the island of St. Croix. Keep up with your resilience and persistence. And to the residents of the area, let's try to find a happy medium. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Bolkes. I wanted to ask the doctor his thoughts. I know initially when you were preparing your presentation, you were not aware about the possibilities of a compromise being this R3. So I just wanted to get your thoughts as to
right.
How do you see
I
the
think
compromise from the more extensive commercial B2, which your testimony specifically spoke about the extensive commercial, wide open possibilities of a B2 versus the attempt to scale it back by implementing a R3. Just your general, quick, concise thoughts on that.
Well, my quick concerns are that that R3 still opens the door to a lot of different things. It opens the door to mobile homes. My point is I think we're all for increasing housing. That's not a problem. They're just structured pathways that both protect the developer and the residents, and that's in a planned area development, which is specifically a tool that DPNR has, and I don't understand why that itself is not an acceptable alternative. Why the shift to R3, which opens the door to a lot more, and I think the community itself does not feel protected by that.
But would it be substantially less than a B2? I'm just saying it may not be specifically what you would ideally like to have. But I'm saying
Is
in
it
an
better
attempt,
than, is B2 better, is R3 better than B2?
in an attempt to arrive at a compromise, does this reflect a compromise in your view?
I think it reflects that we're heading in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your response.
Point of information.
Okay, Senator Heiliger, hold 1 second. Senator Lewis, point of information. Then I'll have you respond. Senator Barnes, then we'll go to your point of information. Senator Alma Francis Heiliger.
Dr. Doward, good afternoon. Right here. You in Beeston Hill, is there a homeowners association?
Yes, there is.
You're the president?
I am not. I'm a member.
Oh, so your comments today does reflect your opinion?
Yes, they reflect mine, but they're also reflective of the community as well.
You're the president?
I'm not the president, but I don't live in isolation with the community and the homeowners association.
No, because in your testimony you talked about Dr. Doward. You didn't say, I am a representative of the homeowners association. So your comments today would be reflective of your opinion.
They are reflective of my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lewis. Ms. Barnes, you care to, you had a point to?
Thank you, Senator Potter, and I do prefer Ms. Barnes. It gets a bit confusing, right? Yes. But Senator, I am so happy that you asked the question about the response to an R3, because it is clear to the property owner that he is simply not welcome. We had the commercial center that was removed. We moved from B3 to B2. It was still a problem. We're now proposing a compromise to R3. It's still a problem. I suspect that if we were to say R2, it would still be an issue. So I hope that we are aware of what's really happening here and that we're paying attention.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Senator Alicia Alma Francis Heiliger, you're recognized for your point of information.
Well, technically, you are not wrong. Alicia is my middle name. My name is Alma Alicia.
That's true.
Francis.
That's true. That's true.
You're still in the ballpark. While we are attempting, and I speak for myself as a representative in here, and while I'm getting this message as if though R3 is predominantly residential, there's a whole list of commercial items that could be built on R3. A lot. It's not a little bit. From community centers, medical clinics. I could go down apparel and accessory retail, art galleries, automobile and motorcycle rentals, babysitting bureaus, cafeterias. It's a lot of things that could still be built on R3. Drugs and proprietary retail, delicatessens, floral shops, jewelry shops, liquor shops. This is not limited to just residential. R3 has a lot of things you could still put on that property. And we cannot sit here and attempt to make the public believe, oh, it's no big deal. We could just go to R3. Why can't we? If you want to go to R3, fine. But put in the document that it's limited to housing. Why is that a battle in here when the whole discussion we have in today is we want more housing? Why can't we just put in there that it's limited to housing? And stop telling the public that R3 is a better option when even nightclubs is under R3. We have to stop it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Alma Francis Heiliger. Senator Kenneth Gittins, you're recognized for your point of information. Please, ladies and gentlemen. Clapping isn't allowed. You may proceed, Senator Gittins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to remind everyone where we're at. So
you could refrain from the clapping. I just sat here and spoke about safeguards to put into the bill. And I'm going to use a word that my mom always tell me don't use. And that's the word hate. And I hate for my back to feel like it's up against the wall. Every time there's a project proposal for St. Croix, there always seems to be some pushback. And I am not one of the 15 to ever talk about St. Croix versus St. Thomas versus St. Croix. My mother was from St. Thomas, my father was from St. Croix. This nonsense must stop. Now, I had to look back because I'm asking myself, how do we achieve progress without change? How in the world do we do it? I look back here and I remember the majority of my colleagues in this same body previously voted on a rezone of an area on the island of St. John. A majority of the members in this same body voted to place a bar directly next to a senior assisted living facility. If we were able, or I should say, if they were able to support such a movement, such a decision, then why we can't have the same approach to make such a decision with some willingness to see some progress on St. Croix. At some point, we must strike a balance. I am really sick and tired of this because every time it comes to St. Croix, this is what we get. A back and forth, back and forth. You know what we often do on St. Croix? You know what we often do? When it comes to a St. Thomas project, we say, you know what, we're going to allow our St. Thomas colleagues to take the lead on this. Let's see where we go. But now, my gosh, we just spoke about the safeguards. I did say that in addition to the residential portion, that it also gives some hospitality uses. And I listed a number of areas as well. So why are we going back and forth? I'm asking you, colleagues, let's give St. Croix a chance to progress. Please, that's all I ask. Let's approach this with the same zest, zeal, whatever you want to call it, to see some kind of progress for the island district of St. Croix. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of information.
Thank you very much. Really? All right, now hold your point of information, Senator Heiliger. We're going to move on. Senator Hubert Frederick, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Pleasant good afternoon, everyone. Again, listening and viewing audience, testifiers, and my office, central staff. I'm happy that I'm getting more information about this than I had originally read and researched. I saw a veto bill that came since then. That was nice. I didn't know about that. So this property has been around for a while. Mr. and Ms. Bay, can you please tell me, sir, what was your original intent when you purchased this property? What did you have in mind?
My intention was to rezone it and put a shopping mall on it and put other residential as well. But after seeing so many vacancy on the island of St. Croix, it didn't make any sense to do any shopping malls. So that's why I just switched my plan, just strictly residential.
Okay. All right. Hey, Dr. Doward, how long have you lived in that area?
I've lived there since 2013.
And would you say your property value, would it be impacted positively or negatively if we add more housing?
If you add more housing and the appropriate housing, probably values could go up. It really depends on what's there.
Okay, so we're adding, 24 units, potentially?
24 units, we have no real idea of what the design is. That could bring property values up or down. I just don't know. If that's what the question is.
Well, I could see where we could coexist. I don't think this is a situation where we can't come to a common ground here. There's something that the community doesn't want, that particular community. You don't want something. I know one is the roadway, because there's only one road that I saw in one of the exhibits that you presented. One road. So that's going to be impacted. Mr. McBain.
Well, I'm willing to compromise as well, not
Okay.
using that road. I can divert that road in another part of the property, which will be between the church and the Beeston Hill Gym.
Good. So then that helps a whole lot with the traffic congestion, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, all right, Dr. Doward, the road is taken care of now. Does that help?
That certainly improves. I'm sorry. That certainly improves the circumstance. You know, ultimately, I think we're all on board for a compromise. I think R3 zoning, if it was to go that way, that was limited to housing, which is the entire intent of Mr. Atta Mispe. I don't want to speak for him, but he's saying would be something I think the community could get behind in perpetuity with the land, with those restrictions.
So then I would come to DPNR. Is there anywhere we could find a pathway to merge these two? Because I see compromise. I see something happening here. Is there any way DPNR could help define a pathway?
1 minute.
Yes, Senator. Compromise is able. I just want to put on the record the department, we are supposed to be the advocate for the comp plan. So we do have the position that there's current mechanisms available, but as the code states, the legislature can act as they deem appropriate. So compromise is possible.
And the reason why I spoke this way is because, trust me, I know I have properties, and if someone decided to put a bar in front of my property, my single family dwelling where I have a family, I would be very upset. It would make me feel like my children are unsafe and that my investment now is going to lose value. So this is a legitimate concern people have. I don't blame the residents to be concerned. They need some clarity. So, Mr. Macbeth, you want to add some clarity?
Yeah, even to make it much more clear, I'm willing to compromise. No bars, no clubs.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think we're making progress.
Thank you very much. Senator Frederick. Senator Carla Joseph, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. A pleasant good afternoon again to everyone. I do have some concerns, and I always, because I know, guess a little bit, I'm not the expert in this, but I understand how the comprehensive land and water use plan should have been done. I mean, we passed the act, the bill, but you're supposed to have a map and a light to show where various zonings or is going to be applicable. That is not the case. We have not seen that. And the legislature has within its authority to pass laws, notwithstanding that terminology, to rezone those areas. That's within in our purview and right. So I want to ask you, Mr. Misbah, would you be amenable to a variance?
No.
And why not? The variance, I'm going to tell you, most of these, because of what I just said, with the rezoning, and it is spot zoning, variances hold the applicant foot to the fire so that they could be accountable. They cannot construct anything outside of that variance. Ms. LaPlace, am I speaking correctly? Whatever we have as, and we put in for a use of this property, that is what they are limited to use the property for?
Well, with this particular property, you'd also have to include the density along with the use, because the use is residential, which is already allowed. What you're looking at is density.
Okay, now we're looking at density, and with a R3 zoning, what is the height of the buildings?
The R3 is allowed 6 stories.
6 stories. So I don't know, I knew it was 6 stories. I don't know if everyone is aware of that, that you can go up that height. Dr. Doward, would that impact you or your neighbors where they live? Because that's another factor. I don't know if it was discussed or contemplated.
No, I was not specifically aware of that, and I think that's a critical issue. And also, if we were to, we're also concerned about the nature of what's being built and how it's built. We would want concrete structures that could withstand hurricanes. And we would want to have that kind of reassurances.
Okay, Mr. Misbah, you wanted to comment?
I can compromise that we're not going to put more than 3-story building height.
Okay, but you see, you could say that. You could say that, and that's why I like variances. You can say that today, that you're not going to put any more than 3 stories, but with a R3, by a matter of right, once we rezone this, if we do, you can do it. There's nothing that is going to prevent you from doing it. We will have to clearly spell it out in the legislation, and that again is a spot zoning, which is non-conforming to the CZM plan, and that's my concern. We constantly are doing these rezoning, knowing that it is not conforming to the CZM plan that was passed. I just have one final question, Mr. Chairman, if I may be allowed to do so.
You may wrap up, Senator.
Thank you so kindly. Mr. Misbah, I want to see you do this project because we do have a need here for housing. We do have that need. What would you look at as far as addressing with some guardrails? We already have the road, we already having the stories, no bars, no restaurants. What other items can we look at as far as the density of the project? Because how many acres are you looking to develop with the number of units you have here? For 24, is it 24 units? Clustered. Yeah. So, yes.
Senator, thank you so much. I do believe that Mr. Misbah has demonstrated a willingness to compromise and to work with the body as well as the residents to arrive at a happy medium. But I would not advise him to make further concessions on the record until such time that we evaluate everything. But definitely there's a willingness to sit and have discussions and compromise to the best extent possible.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. I still would prefer the variance. Thank you.
Can I say something about the variance, Senate?
On the chair's time.
Yes, you may.
So with the variance, as Ms. LaPlace indicated, you're still going to be bound by whatever the previous, the actual zone requirements are. When we're talking about zoning, it's not just actually land use allowance, as Ms. LaPlace indicated. You have design criteria and density criteria that you also have to consider as well when you think in terms of your actual design specifications. So it's beyond the actual land allowance. That's why the variance would present some degree of a challenge.
Thank you very much. Senator Marvin Blyden, I know you have a flight to catch. You may proceed with your 4 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate it much. Good afternoon again to the testifier. Mr. Misby, in respect to your zoning request, I see we went from what you wanted at first, we went on 3 steps, and you're still willing to compromise, and I respect that. I think it's important, though, based on what Ms. Bond just said, I was going to say the same thing also. I would not go for variance also. Because, for instance, if it passes that we have those units and we want to put a laundry for the residents, I think that's good. That's a good thing, in my opinion. I think it's a good thing. So, but my point is, compromise is always a good thing. And I see that we can make a compromise in terms of what we want to accomplish in terms of the goal. When it comes to development, I'm all for development. When it comes to housing, I'm all for housing. And I think that there's an opportunity here that we can accomplish both without basically offending those individuals that live in the area. Based on the rendering, I like what I see. I see an opportunity for us to actually make young Virgin Islanders homeowners, others renters, because we do have a housing crisis at this time. And it's a fact. And I believe that once these homes are built, we can actually satisfy those individuals in terms of their needs. I must say, though, that it's kind of hard for me, as a Virgin Islander, and being in this space for some time in terms of housing for over 40 years, 40 plus years. Whereas when you're trying to accomplish a goal of assisting someone with a place to lay their head, a place to have discussions with their family, a place where many decisions are made, most important decisions are made. And the difficulties, especially in such a small territory with such small land space, you know, the difficulties and the challenges, but it comes along with what we're trying to accomplish. And I do appreciate DPNR's stance and what they do, because it's not easy, but at the same time, there are ways to get things done. And we here, as senators, can also have an impact in terms of the R3. He has stated something he's willing to compromise. We can put it in the language, and other concerns we can put in the language. That way we accomplish the goal of building homes for those individuals. You get your needs met, he gets his need met, and we all move forward. It's simple. It's not difficult. And I see that the way we need to move forward. And right now, my staff is listening and they are actually taking notes. And we are going to put in a language to address some of those wants and some of those needs. So I don't see us not accomplishing a goal. We can't vote today. We are not going to vote today. We don't vote in the committee of the whole. But at the same time, we have debates, we have dialogue, and we come to some type of compromise, and we can actually add the language to the bill. So if we are seriously wanting to make progress and move forward, and saying, yes, we want to help, but we don't want this, we don't want that, fine. We are having a discussion, we're taking our notes, and we're going to do what we got to do to accomplish that goal. So I'm willing to work with both sides to see what we can accomplish. But at the end of the day, we must provide housing, rental units, whatever you want to call it, workforce housing, and other type of housing for our people to actually exist and thrive. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the time. I really appreciate it. I gotta go. Flight to catch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Blyden. Senator Novell Francis, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to everyone. This is a very important discussion here today, because we do, in fact, have a level of a crisis, housing crisis here on St. Croix, and we could see it as we traverse these islands in terms of the level of homelessness. We have families that continue to be impacted by the lack of the housing stock that we have here on St. Croix. But believe it or not, every time we have these major developments, we always find ourselves in some kind of a controversy. You wouldn't believe the education complex was a controversial discussion because, again, they were utilizing agricultural land to construct the education complex. The Virgin Islands National Guard was an issue because, again, they were utilizing agricultural land to establish the Virgin Islands National Guard. So we all find ourselves in this junction. I'm hoping that, today that this discussion would amount to a level of some compromise because, we all have to really coexist here on St. Croix. I wanted to ask you, first of all, Leia, LaPlace-Matthew, what was the recommendation made by DPNR to the developer in regards to what would be the best approach to be able to handle this development?
So over the years, we have discussed the different options to the applicant, detailing, the process, the group dwelling process. It stays entirely within DPNR, could be done within, say, 3 to 6 months. The plan area development, which we have had successfully implemented on St. Thomas, that's another process that takes about 3+ months because it involves the legislature. The rezoning, it's a process, goes through DPNR and the legislature, 3+ months. There's no guarantee to the request. So we do lay out all the options to the applicant, but ultimately they are the one to choose which option they wish to take. But the department, because we now have the comprehensive land and water use plan, we do have to advocate and follow its recommendations based on what the people of the VI stated that they want done.
Thank you. And Dr. Doward, I know that you have spoken to the fact that you don't oppose housing development in that community. What have been the discussion with you and the association or the neighbors in that area in terms of what will be the compromise? What is it that you're expecting to see there? You don't want anything at all there? Or what is it that you really want to see happen there?
I mean, I think what ultimately all of the neighbors, if I was to speak, is that it stay R1 that we all thought we were going to be in. I know we're in a different area of the conversation in regards to that, but I think that's the baseline expectation. I know we've been saying the developer has made all these compromises, but really the baseline is he bought into an area that was zoned a particular area, and then he had a bunch of great ideas. And if we can all do that, why shouldn't that option be open to all Virgin Islanders to indiscriminately change?
The option is available to all Virgin Islanders. It's not selective. I mean, the option that's available, again, this is a process by which you're able to move that. So it is available to all. But I'm saying, what is the compromise that have been discussed that you believe that you could be settled with? Because this body certainly could be in a position where we set conditions. We have had instances where we establish, whether it's R3 or whatever, and make zoning changes and ensure that there's conditions established that meets the needs of the community as well.
I'm not sure if I'm in a position to give all the stipulations today at this moment. What I think would be appropriate is for this to go back to DPNR so we can carve that out and bring it back to this body.
So you believe that the residents are the one that should ultimately just make the decision, final decision of what's going to be allowed there, or there will be a fair compromise in terms of the discussion? I think
that would allow for a fair compromise, because what we've had so far is a request to change from R1 to commercial. We had a complete change of the neighborhood with the initial intent of a medical building and a shopping center and housing, and then it's been scaled back to housing, but still with a desire for commercial zoning on the belief that that would improve financing, and now we're heading back in a direction that I think everyone can possibly get on board, but I don't know if we can iron that all out here today. And if I had all of the facts in front of me, because I only have conceptual drawings based on what Mr. Mispay has provided, I'm not in a position to state that to you today.
But in all fairness, the process has been, what, 4 years? At least 3 or 4 years that there's been a discussion in respect to this. So, what have been that discussion in terms of what would be adequate, what would be acceptable? Anything?
Yeah, I agree. I was not aware that this was going to become. It was an issue 4 years ago. It just popped up again in February, and now we're having this conversation today. So I wasn't aware that it was going to arise. Once again, I still have conceptual drawings, and I appreciate you trying to drill down what we could figure out today, but I don't feel like I'm in a position to adequately give you that information. And I think the pathway of of collectively getting together and bringing it back in a way that I know the community would be a bit more receptive, as we all know that there's a housing need. And another thing also is I don't understand why we can't go through the standard processes that DP&R has stipulated as the appropriate pathways, and that seems to be lost in this conversation today, except for by a few senators.
Ms. Barnes?
Senator, thank you. I do believe that it is absolutely clear, as was stated, that there is just a desire for the area to remain R1, notwithstanding the changing demographics and the changing needs of this territory. So again, it is just a desire to stymie progress and to have things remain as they are, as they should ever be. Not considering that there is, again, a change in demographic and change in needs in this territory. The Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan is a framework. It is a policy framework that requires significant work to make it an effective development tool. And we're not there yet, as was clearly stated. And again, if the residents truly had a desire for compromise and participatory discourse, then recommendations should have been made beyond the planned area development, which in and of itself inherently can be further stymied by the residents as well. So again, it is just a mechanism institutionalized to keep seemingly marginalized individuals marginalized.
And thank you for your advocacy. I must say, obviously, I served in the 33rd with you when you brought back up the issue of the Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan, and we're finally able to get that done in the 35th. But is it a fact that all our focus should be right now is in terms of the 3 or 4 acres that needs to be developed? Is that the position of the developer at this time, or are you still, there's a need for us to be able to discuss the whole 14.9 or 15 acres of land? What is the goal for today's discussion?
Discussion is to develop the 3 acres and to move on to develop more as we finish the 24 units.
Which means that you'll have to come back to this body if there's some decision or some compromise that's made for the 3 or 4 acres, then you'll come back. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
And how close, based on the 3 acres, Dr. Dowd, how close is this 3-4 acres to your property?
This lies directly adjacent, and per his drawing, it would be right up against my property, actually. And I would also just like to also point out, because Ms. Barnes says there's been no attempt for the community to communicate with Mr. Mispa, and that is completely inaccurate. There's no other way for us to. We had no idea that he was going to that he was going to bring this issue up again, and there's no way to really to communicate with him outside of the process of DP&R and this hearing today.
That is so incorrect, and but I'm not going to. One of the things I will not do is engage in a back and forth with a native Virgin Islander. I will not fall into that trap. But what I would say is that when you are truly concerned about public participation, you do not call a town meeting at an exclusive tennis club. When we call town meetings, town hall meetings, it's in schools, it's in Canigata Ballpark, it's where the public truly can access and truly participate. So if the intent is true participation, we're not having town hall meetings at exclusive tennis clubs. And Mr. Misbe is accessible, and everyone knows that Mr. Misbe is a client of mine, and I am truly available in terms of how to get in contact with me. I was emailed at 5 a.m. by someone from the Beeston Hill community asking me, went to my website at 5 a.m., looked at my company motto, and basically used that and asked me if I kept green leaves green for Just Right Trucking. So I had to refer that to the FBI. So if they can make contact with me for that, they can make contact to have a discussion regarding a compromise.
Very well. I think my time has been called, Mr. Chair, so I'll go ahead and conclude here. I'll just ask again the representative from DPNR, what's your position in respect to the recommendation of the R3 with guardrails? Is that something that you could work with, support, or you need some additional time to consider that?
We can get behind the compromise. We'll need further information, more further analysis, but we will be open to compromise.
And Senator, if I may, and contact was made with Mr. Misbe, asking him to name his price to sell the property. So they have made contact with him.
Thank you very
Point
much.
of information.
Senator Francis Heiliger, you're recognized for your point of information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to make sure, put something on the record. One of the things that I notice here with us is that if other senators have varying opinions, we attempt to divide. And I honestly, when I first came into the institution in 2021, this Beeston Hill issue was before me. And I was 100% against. I was a full no. When it came up again, I was a no. This is the first time since this has been before me. I have been willing, because it was supposed to be limited to housing. I said, if it is limited to housing, I will support it. So I don't want the record to show that I am against anything for St. Croix. What I am attempting to do is to make sure that there's a happy medium for the residents that are there, as well as the potential homeowners that could be purchasing or living in these residences. And if we have to get to a point that I have to limit my mentality because some of my colleagues believe that because they reside on an island and I don't, I will never acquiesce to that. I am a duly elected official. I have the right to research and investigate every decision I make. And I will never give up my right to vote on anything or acquiesce any thought process because you choose to divide this entire territory. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and have a blessed day.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis Heiliger. Senator Avery Lewis, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, testifiers.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. No, go ahead, man. Go ahead. Yeah. I'll come back.
I apologize, Senator Clifford. Joseph, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good afternoon again to everybody here in the room. Good afternoon to the boys and islands. And the listening public, as you could hear my voice, good afternoon to everyone. First of all, Mr. Misbe, I must say thank you for investing in St. Croix. The reason I'm saying that is because people make money here and invest the money elsewhere. So thank you at least for giving St. Croix the chance. You have this, we're gonna work on a medium. I'm listening to the lady for DPNR, so I'm gonna go to her and ask her a question now. As far as the comprehensive water use plan, what does it call for that area?
So, Senator, I think what's important to note is the comprehensive plan process. So first, you come up with your guidelines. Your community votes on what they want to see as the future of the VI. We've done that step. The next step is then moving on to future land use mapping. We have not reached that step. So right now, we don't know what the public truly wants for that area, but we right now have the policy guidelines, and one of them is no spot zoning. Maybe with time, as we get staffing and funding, we can do, as I previously mentioned in the previous blocks, mass rezonings, analysis of the estates that over the years we've seen need changes, and confirming, with the public what changes they want.
I'm listening to you talking about with time, but this situation is in front of us now. So I mean, yeah, because I'm being short of employee and everything else, it sounds good on the record, but really, every homeowner wants to know where we're going. The investor wants to know where we're going. So we have to concentrate on now. So with some, I know for sure he can't be in a B2 because I don't think he could build the type of structure he wants to build. So right now, I'm in R2. R2. Let me come off of the B because we're already off of the B for today. We ain't in no more B. We in the R zone now. So we at R. We can't go down to R2 because he wouldn't be able to build what he wants to build. That's a true factor or not?
No, Senator. The current zoning R1 does allow for the proposed development. He would have to either apply for a group dwelling or plan area development. They, however, want to compromise with a rezoning to an R3, which, as stated, we would be able to compromise. We would just need greater analysis.
1 minute.
So you'll be waiting on us to make the decision as a body?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. As far as, again, we're here today. So, okay, you say in a 1 he would have been able to do it. So in a 2 he'd have been able to do it as well.
You can do it in an R2 as well, using the group dwelling or the plan area development processes.
So it's not a matter of rights then?
It is a matter of right because those are permitting processes.
All right, thank you for your response. And so for right now, you're already willing to cut a new road, so the traffic will go away, as far as what they were worrying about.
Correct, yes.
So that's one of the biggest issues you had with this project.
Time.
Yes.
Okay. So how soon after this process you're willing to start?
Well, as soon as we get the permits, we're ready to start.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah, because the permit will take care of the road and everything else. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you guys for the response.
Thank you very much, Senator Clifford A. Joseph. Senator Angel Bolquez, you are recognized for your point of information.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. In relation to the previous senator's question in relation to the road, if you can just kindly place on the record, where exactly do you plan to cut the new road? Because I know that the gymnasium area is in a, I don't know if it's in that area, but it may cause some congestion. But I'm just curious to know exactly where you plan to cut.
Well, we have an easement of 30 feet between the gym and the church.
Okay. Is there any flexibility to maybe, why not the bypass area?
Yeah, that's optional.
That's optional?
Yeah.
Okay, because
because we have about 1,500 feet on the main road, so we can cut a shift lane to go into the property.
Okay, okay. But then again, the traffic study would be after this rezoning, and then you would figure out where would be the best place.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Angel Bolquez. Senator Avery Lewis, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, good afternoon to everyone, the viewing and listening audience. Dr. Dawar, I think we heard a lot today, and you say you're basically speaking on behalf of you and what you would like to see in the neighborhood as well. And rightfully, you have some say. You should have some say in the matter. Any of the compromises you heard on the far left to you are amenable to?
Well, I'd like to piggyback on what Senator Joseph brought up, whether he did it directly or indirectly. The pathway forward already exists in the current zoning. I'm still unclear why we need to change the zoning to accomplish the same goal of housing that's available already to the developer. I also would like to piggyback on a few things.
No.
No. Okay.
Ms. Barnes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
I
Senator.
saw in your application to DPNR that they said that they to construct and build townhouses for both rental and sale. You plan to sell at some point in time, or, want to elaborate on that for me?
Yes, Senator, there's a desire for both short-term rental, regular rental, and sales as well. Again, that's the general business model that was presented, correct?
All right, so you want to talk a little bit about the type of structures we plan to build?
So I will let Mr. Misbe elaborate on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, most of the structure is going to be concrete, with concrete roofs.
Oh, concrete with concrete roofs.
Correct.
Okay, great. Any energy efficient?
We might put solar system on them.
Okay.
And the reason we're going concrete because I don't want to buy hurricane insurance.
You know, one of the things I've been pondering, I received a lot of emails. Some in favor, some not in favor. And, you know, I'd like to always come to some kind of happy medium, some kind of in-between, like, okay, it's not going to be a win-win, but it can be a better pill to swallow. And both sides won't walk away saying, well, at least we didn't win everything, but we got something. And, you know, I hear Mr. Misbe, and I'm just going to be honest. When we walk through those double doors and the legislature make the decision, a lot of other things will happen. So you know, but for today, I only could control what happened in here, and I could control my vote. Now, I know for a fact, because I've been in meetings and we've been hearing, we have about $24 billion to spend. Some have started. Over here, you all started at no school. What was the school name? Alfredo? Then Alfredo Andrews? Woodson, sorry. Woodson. The new school? Arthur Richards. Arthur Richards. And, you know, more contractors are coming in. We started the Donna Christensen Health Center. More things coming, so we need place for people to stay. I get it. Some people would like their neighborhood to remain within a sorted fabric. But then we have individuals who buy the land and they want to improve on their land. So they come before us, they come before DPNR, and DPNR say, well, I don't have the last say, the legislature have the last say. A correct so far, Ms. LaPlace?
Correct, Senator.
So here we are to make a decision. We're up to B3, we're into B2, now we're down to R3. And it still ain't sound like a hearing, like we have a compromise. I don't know, like, Dr. Doward, after tonight, y'all gonna have a meeting. Because Wednesday, this body gonna make a decision. One way or the other. Wednesday, God's willing, this body gonna make a decision. So tell me now.
Tell you now what that compromise is.
What you're looking forward to, what would be the medium, at least on your end. Because you say you don't speak, you can't speak for everyone. At least on your end.
I can't speak for everyone, and I feel like I don't have enough information in front of me. I mean, what the compromise would be for me is if the land stays housing. If that's what we want to do for that, it should be limited to housing. And that seems like a reasonable compromise. It seems like that's what the developer wants, and that's what the community wants.
But he said that's what they're putting up, housing.
Correct.
But you're just not comfortable with it being R3.
I think if it's going to be R3, it should be limited to housing, because we just heard how many different things that you can put up with R3.
But you also heard us say that we could put things in there to bar him from doing those other things. You heard my colleague talk about. 1 second, Mr. Chair, please. No gas stations, no bars, no tavern, no nightclubs, outdoor music, entertainment are permitted. Those things that, as a body, we could make amendments and put in there. I still wouldn't be comfortable.
If I could go through the list and check off the things that I don't think would be, I'm just saying, I'm just not in a position right now to tell you what would be great. In the most general terms, housing would be something that I'm happy with if that's the intent of the developer. We're on the same page.
Well, Dr. Doward, I know the people that elected us to do a job, and such we're going to lead. We're going to go through the list and check off, and we're going to make a decision. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Avery Lewis. Senator, clearly, in a community as small, really, and as interconnected as ours, I don't think we can afford to become so completely entrenched in our position. I think that it is, and that's just in general. I think that it is important for us to try to find a level of compromise that we can all live with. Clearly, no side is going to get everything that they desire. So I don't think that it's realistic to envision a laundry list of 500 things that we're going to say this person cannot do. It's not realistic. There is going to have to be some level of give and take and compromise. That's just how it is. You're not going to get everything that you desire. I have never met Mr. Misby before, but it seems to me that there is a willingness to move because originally he came in with a B2. That is what he was seeking. So I don't know if there is, if we're acknowledging that there is an attempt to move and to compromise or to acknowledge some of the legitimate concerns of the homeowners. And at least from this senator's perspective, what I am observing, or what I have observed from the beginning of the discussion was a willingness to move off of what was I think a position that legitimately would create a level of concern. What am I going to be getting ultimately? What's going to happen to my space of sanctuary that I have been living in for the last 10 years? Now the whole quality and character of the area is in jeopardy. It is a legitimate concern that homeowners have. But I'm saying the climate, just the whole reality of the Virgin Islands has changed somewhat. We're at a space right now where we need workforce housing, affordable housing for our children, affordable housing for visitors. This is an attempt to accomplish that. And Doc, you are legitimately saying, I would like to have some parameters to make sure that this isn't just a total free-for-all where the quality and character of the place that I've been living in just changes. So it's saying we're trying to achieve some level of compromise, right? And in compromise, no side gets exactly everything that they desire. That's just my thoughts, and I said that before. Tony, I'm going to give you a chance to...
Yeah, I'm sorry, I hate to beat a dead horse. It's really hard for me. I understand I'm all about compromise, understanding what the need is. If the goal is housing and you can do it in the current zoning, why is there a need for compromise? I don't understand. I just don't intellectually understand that. If the goal is to do more than that, then I understand why we need to expand it and maybe go, well, we need to do more here. St. Croix needs to grow. We need commercial. We need this. This is the spot for the land. We need to go, 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 go. But if the housing, the developers had 4 years with the recommendations from DP&R to go through 3 different pathways. The most sensible one is PAD. And he hasn't chosen that. He has never personally contacted me, ever. He hasn't spoken to anyone, and this issue just came up again. So I'm sorry to be a little bit, as a born Crujan who has gone through schools here in St. Dunstan's, my family is here. My grandmother would win first prize down at the agricultural fair. I am as Crujan as it gets, and to have finally been able to get a home that I want to keep for my children for forever and have invested the kind of money I have in this historic property that I am so proud to have, this is devastating for me. So I want to be cognizant of the fact that we need housing here. But if this was to be ripped in front of me, and we've seen disasters like Barron Spot and the Millennial Mall, and there are countless other issues, I would be only heartbroken, but just broken as a person to feel like I came back to my community and this is what it is. Because for me, I've kind of made the dream that I think you would want having grown up here. So that's my impassioned, very real say to the legislature. And I hope this touches you guys, because this is important to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Senator Kenneth Gittins, you're recognized for your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I must start by saying that the voting record in this institution speaks for itself, and it will show again what I stated before, that when it comes to St. Croix project, there's always some pushback. We're trying to find a medium here. Progress requires change, people. It requires change. My earlier point was not about division, colleagues. It was merely about fairness and an opportunity for St. Croix. All of us sitting here, regardless of where we're sitting, have one goal that we're all agreeing on: housing. Housing. We have an opportunity before us. The applicant, through his representative, have already said that they will even agree to the R3. We, as the voting body at session, have already told you that if we go to the R3, we're willing to put in the safeguards. But what is really in my mind right now, it just seems like y'all don't want him to do nothing with his property. That is not an option. At least he's going through the right process. And I don't want to get in who is more Crucian or who is more Crucian and whatnot. But just like how I know of you, I know of him and his brothers and all of them who were born and raised and went to school right here too. They probably just don't look like me and you. But that has nothing to do with progress. With progress comes change. Colleagues, we have been discussing, and we will discuss further again, that the applicant, through his representative, is willing to go the other approach, which preserves the residential character of the area while still helping us address the serious need for additional housing on St. Croix, and also even addressing the concerns of the bordering neighbors. We will put the safeguards. It has been done before, and we will be doing it because we hear your concerns. But for the applicant not to have an opportunity to rezone his property is just not an option. And I am hopeful that you all will understand that you have elected us to make the right decisions on behalf of the masses of this territory. On behalf of the masses, I served for some 21 years as a law enforcement officer here, and I know one thing that I wasn't going to be able to do. And again, my mother, who is not here, I always have to think back on the things that she taught me and the things that she's said. and that's that you are not going to be able to get everybody to agree with you.
Time.
That said, at the appropriate time on Wednesday, which is session, and prior to that, we will have a discussion again. And I am willing, I've signed on, I was preempted with the R3 rezoning. However, I've signed on with the other senators, and I am willing to move forward with the R3 with the safeguards in place. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Kenneth Gittens. Senator Carla Joseph, you're recognized for your point of information.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask Ms. LaPlace-Matthew. Ms. LaPlace-Matthew, should this body consider the R3 zoning, would the applicant still have the ability to do a subdivision?
Yes, Senator, it would be under R3
okay.
provisions.
And how big would the lots be?
6,000 square foot is the minimum allowed.
6,000 square foot, and they would have to come to Department of Planning and Natural Rezoning to actually put in an application to subdivide.
We only handle applications where 4 or more parcels and or a road is being created.
Okay, he's mentioned that he's creating a road, so there may be a road creating. So would they come back to you for that?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Okay, and would they, so they wouldn't come back for the subdivision to you if they should get the R3 zoning?
If it is a subdivision that has 4 or more lots, it would come back to DPNR for review.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarity.
Thank you very much, Senator Carla J. Joseph. Oh, you don't have a point of information. I wanted to ask Senator Barnes or Mr. Mesbe about the original, you originally sought a B2 zoning. Explain to us what was the rationale behind originally seeking a B2?
Again, Senator, it was, we reviewed the code and B2 offered us to move forward with the development as a matter of right. And so with that and with the allowances as it relates to design criteria, we were desired to move forward with that. Notwithstanding, as we evaluated R3, we found that it would be able to satisfy what we're trying to do as well in terms of the development. So the B2 would have given us broader allowances and flexibility. And so it was more desires of us to do it that way. But notwithstanding, hearing the concerns, we figured that we would, again, provide a compromise with the R3.
I wanted to ask you about DPNR's recommendation for the planned area development. And DPNR, the subject matter experts, Ms. Matthew and her team did their analysis and reviewed the process, and they determined that the best approach would be a planned area development.
Right.
Is there an objection from you, from your client, to do the planned area development? Why or why not?
Senator, the planned area development, again, is very upfront cost intense. You have to do significant amount of studies. There's a significant upfront cost with the planned area development. It's also extremely restrictive, and there is no guarantee after all of these costs that you expend upfront for the various studies that you are going to get an approval. And so you have the cost consideration, you have the time consideration, you also have the risk factor of, again, it being stymied by the very quote-unquote public sentiment, albeit from a select elite few of individuals. So again, the risk factor associated with going that route, the time constraints, the cost constraint, and we're also very mindful of the resource needs as it relates to planned area development and the studies that's required. We might say 3 months, but I know for a fact the professionals who do many of these studies are in such high demand now because we are in this rebuild USVI and the permitting and the NEPA clearances that are required. It just was prohibitive on a myriad of levels and remains that way. And if we've had discussions with the residents, we would be able to explain these things to them.
Okay.
The residents have the concerns. It is not for us to reach out to them, even though we had no problems with that. We're available for discussions at any point in time.
Okay. You said one thing that I heard you say, that you can dump a lot of money into a PAD, the planned area development, and you said that there is no guarantee that it will be approved at the end of the day? Is that what you...
No, Senator, it's a permit. So you will be granted. You just have to do the studies up front. You have the public hearing with the neighbors. You hear their concerns. You make any changes to the plan so that you compromise then. And then it comes to the legislature and the permit is approved by the legislature.
Okay. So it's a much more involved process, a more lengthy time
It's
span?
more involved. It's more predictable for the community. There's safeguards. With the plan area development, you have to develop as the approved plans by the legislature. You have the 2-year construction period that if the applicant does not do it, it expires, or they have to come before the legislature. If there's any changes that the applicant wants to make to the plan, it has to go back before the legislature.
Is
So
it...
Senate,
Sorry, I'm going to let you... Hold your point just 1 second. So the fact that the legislature, for example, if the legislature were to, I guess, amend, this, to go along with your recommendation, is that something that we can, in your opinion, legislate on Wednesday? Would we be able to say, we provided language that says you are hereby granted, whereas whatever you're granted, therefore, a planned area development? Is that something that, would that be sort of a reverse process where it is granted by the party and then you have to, I don't know, retroactively?
Yes, Senator. So if you grant the plan area development, we would then use the 2-year period that the code gives the applicant to go back to get the studies done, get the construction drawings, have public hearings, to then issue them building permits.
So it is a much more upfront, costly process for
the developer.
And as far as time is concerned, it's a much more drawn out timeline.
It is more costly upfront, whereas with the rezoning, the cost comes afterward because they would still have to do those studies and all of that. But it is more upfront.
Okay, Senator Barnes.
Senator, Ms. LaPlace is correct in that it is more of an upfront cost. But one of the things that we also have to be mindful of, design specifications. This is going to, it requires design specifications up front, again, without the assurances that you're actually going to be able to move forward. So the way it's structured, it's like pre-permitting and doing all of the permitting requisites as prerequisites. So it definitely, it's more time involved, it's more cost involved, and there are risk involved as well, because with the studies and with the public comment period, you then have to go back and address comments that come in the public comment period, and it can be very much protracted. And we know that there are resource limitations in DPNR for such a planned area development process, as well as resource limitations to get these studies done.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. I think we have, colleagues, any final burning questions before we wrap up? No? If not, I want to just thank you very much, presenters, testifiers, for being here today, for offering your very thoughtful comments and testimony. You know, we're always in a tough position in trying to really be mindful and sensitive to what is happening on both sides. That is the unique position that this body is in. You know, we aren't advocating for any one side. We have to objectively hear the information, understand the realities on the ground, and then make an informed decision. And that is exactly what we will do. As I mentioned before, no votes are taken in this committee of the whole meeting. But I just would like to thank you for being here. Thank you for your presentations. And I'm going to allow you all to put your wrap-up statement on the record. I'm going to start with Ms. LaPlace.
I'll ask to go after the testifiers.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sure, you go ahead.
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to present. I want to commend Ms. LaPlace and her team. As the staff of DPNR go, I can definitely say that CCZP is a very efficient division. They are limited based on an antiquated zoning code that they have to make decisions within. So no fault of Ms. LaPlace. She's working with a zoning code that dates back to 1972. And that is why when I served as assistant commissioner, we worked on revisions to the zoning code, and I pray to God that they're adopted sooner rather than later. I want to also commend Dr. Doward. I don't know about his grandmother being at the Ag Fair, but I do know back in the day there was a booth in the village, Doward, Senator Gittins, you can remember, that's where everybody hung out because the food was good. So if you're that Doward, kudos to you in that regard. I do think it's unfortunate that the president of the Beeston Hill community did not come here to speak on behalf of the residents. They have been very active with editorials and the like, but instead, Mr. Doward was brought before us. I think that was probably some sort of strategic decision on their end. However, we see through that as well. As it relates to the comprehensive land and water use plan, nothing that is being proposed as it relates to the R3 designation is in opposition to that plan. The only thing that, quote unquote, generically is being stated that is in opposition is that it is seemingly a spot zoning. But in the classical definition of spot zoning, it is not. And if that is the case, everything that was done today contradicts and was in opposition to the comprehensive land and water use plan because we had quote unquote spot zoning occurring today. So I think it's important that we get the semantics correct. I think it's important that we get an understanding that the comprehensive land and use plan presented a framework, and now we need to fill in the gaps with the appropriate zoning designations, and that has not been done. So who knows, Beeston Hill may end up all R3 one day. Who knows? Because again, it's based on the will of the people as it relates to what is populated in the map for the comprehensive land and water use plan. My client, Mr. Atta Bay, has demonstrated a willingness to compromise, a willingness to make concessions, And at the end of the day, he has a vision to address the housing crisis here on St. Croix, to address the change in demographics on St. Croix. So I would like to thank you, senators, for the time, the opportunity to put our position on the record, and look forward to providing further input if it is so deemed necessary. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Dr. Doward, you may present your conclusion.
I want to thank all the senators for their insights, for their willingness to hear what the residents think. I also would like to thank Ms. LaPlace for her steadfast ability to stick with the rules and regulations of DPNR, and I appreciate her knowledge base. I would also like to acknowledge Ms. Barnes as a wonderful paid advocate for Mr. Misbay. At its core, this decision is not simply about one property or one development. It's about whether or not the planning framework what the legislature recently adopted will guide development decisions across the territory, or whether exceptions will be made when circumstances become convenient. I just want to end with this one quote from Olasi Davis's testimony, which wasn't said today, but he did submit it. Land in the Virgin Islands has always required discipline. Our hillsides are fragile. Our drainage basins are real. Our history shows what happens when planning gives way to speculation. Once commercial precedent is set within a residential corridor, it does not reverse itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doward. Regarding Olasi Davis' testimony, it was shared with every member of the body, and it was also placed on the public drive. So that information in its entirety is available and was shared with every member of the body. So, Ms. LaPlace, I almost finished without you.
Thank you. So I just want to place on the record that the department, we are the holders of the Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan. We've heard the people of the VI over the years pushing, asking for this push to have the Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan. We worked very hard. It was adopted. We thank you all, senators. And so we are working. It is a big project. It is not something that's going to change our zoning overnight. Right now, we're working on zoning code amendments, and the amendments Ms. Barnes mentioned earlier, those are being looked at to ensure that they are in compliance with our adopted comprehensive land and water use plan. So updates are being made to that 2014 amendment document. It'll be going to public hearing for the public's review, and it's going to be a year-by-year process to implement everything that is in the comprehensive land and water use plan. It's a 200-page document, lots of strategies, goals, policies. Yes, it's a lot, but the department is working. Every division within DPNR has a part to play. Every government agency has a part to play. So I just want to remind the public, this is not a plan that is sitting on the shelf. You may not be hearing anything right now because we are working in the background, but as time goes by, you will be hearing updates as we come out, with what's ready for public comment. Also, I want to let the public know that although our code is outdated, there are current avenues to get development done. Many people are not familiar with them, so I'm trying to inform applicants and let them know we have the group dwelling permit. If you have R1 and R2 property and you have more than half an acre, you can get greater density. The planned area development, if you have at least 5 acres, there's incentives within that allows even more density. It allows R3 height, even if your property is zoned A1, A2, R1, R2. So there are current avenues, and we are letting the public know because many people are not familiar with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. LaPlace-Matthew, for really your steady and professional leadership in the planning division at DPNR. I must say that. I must say that. Colleagues, The Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, March 16th, 2026 is hereby adjourned.